surprising. Let me explain. The first generation of South Korea was the generation of workers. They worked in textile factories, shipyards and steel plants. Hard labor, long hours and low pay. But they produced something valuable, something exportable, and those exports brought in foreign money into the economy. This first wave of employment lifted the GDP per capita from just $280 in 1970 to $1,715 by 1980.
60 years later, Korea has become a global power with the world's 12th largest economy.
Korea's export-driven economy is still being driven by 6 industries which can expect to expand even further in the future.
It is the home of the global headquarters of Hyundai Heavy Industry, South Korea's shipbuilding industry, the #1 in the world.
South Korea posts a trade surplus for 22 straight months.
The Republic of Korea is strengthening its position as an active player in international trade thanks to its manufacturing competitiveness, solid growth of its main export items, and diversification of markets.
And then came Generation 2, the graduate generation. When factory jobs got paid enough to send kids to school, the government stepped in. And the government started investing massively into STEM education. STEM as in science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And by 1980s, South Korea had world-class engineers, world-class scientists and world-class managers. So now, instead of just making things, South Koreans could actually design products, improve products and manage their production all by themselves. For example, back in the 1970s and 80s, South Korea just assembled televisions using Japanese parts. But by the 1990s, Samsung wasn't just assembling TVs, it designed its own screens, created proprietary chipsets, and led the global display industry. And today, Samsung doesn't just make electronics, it designs screens used in Apple iPhone.
Samsung is a brand name that's everywhere. In more than 100 million US households, Android phones, TVs, refrigerators, and unconventional displays.
So the 13-inch display can be as big as 17-inch. This is the future of display.
Lee has made it one of the world's most important and valuable companies. It's not just making devices, it's making the chips that power them.
People probably don't know that we've led memory for 3 decades.
Samsung gained international notoriety with the world's first 64 megabit DRAM chip in 1992.
Its presence is so ubiquitous in South Korea that they call their country the Republic of Samsung. Every major company out there, Apple, they have to bend the knee to Samsung. They have to get their chips, their displays. This is a company that everybody has to go through at some point to get what they need because they're so influential.
Now let that sink in. The same company that once assembled TVs for others now powers the display of the world's most premium smartphone. That's not assembly, that is value creation. And that is exactly how the GDP per capita skyrockets when you move from cheap labor to world-class innovation. This shift from the factory floor to engineering office pushed up wages, pushed up productivity, and most importantly, it pushed up GDP. Look at this. The South Korean GDP per capita shot up from $6,610 in 1990 to over $12,200 by 2000. And then came the final leap, the generation of innovators.
It's part of a wider trend here in Korea to foster the start of new businesses by younger Koreans.
The number of new businesses started by people under the age of 30 hit an all-time high.
Korea has a very strong engineering base and also design talent, which is very important nowadays.
The development of smart cars and eventually driverless vehicles, managing robots in telemedicine or in industry.
It's been found that Hyundai Motors, Samsung Electronics, and LG Electronics are among the top 10 global companies with the most patents related to self-driving technology.
Korea also attempted a revolution in the information technology industry. The cutting-edge enterprises that were founded during the IT boom provided a new stimulus to the economy.
You see, the children of engineers did not just stop at good jobs. They started filing patents, building startups, and launching global brands. And from 2000 to 2020, Korea wasn't just exporting electronics, it exported Samsung smartphones, Hyundai cars, and LG displays. In fact, Hyundai was once mocked for making cheap, clunky cars. But now, they build electric vehicles, luxury models, and even invest in hydrogen-powered transport and even flying taxis. This wasn't luck, guys. It was 3 generations of progress. Factory workers, then engineers, and then world-class innovators. And today, South Korea isn't making cheap assembly goods anymore. They make high-value, globally respected products, because of which today, their per capita income is just growing like crazy. It's not magic, it is the people climbing the economic ladder together. Today, South Korea's per capita GDP stands at $33,000. That is how South Korea made an epic transformation from $150 per capita GDP to $33,000 per capita. If this is very clear to you, let's talk about India. Because while we've been watching Malaysia stall and South Korea rise, India is approaching its moment of truth. So the question is, where does India stand today? Well, on paper, India looks like it's booming. Record-breaking startups are coming out, bullet trains are being planned, highways are being built at lightning speed, GDP is growing faster than major economies all around the world. All these numbers look very, very lucrative. But if we look closely, the picture is far, far complicated. You see, India officially became a lower middle income country in 2007. Today, our per capita income is around $2,400. And if you look at the historical progress, it looks like a significant progress. But here's what the number hides. India is not one economic story, it's 3 different countries stacked on top of each other. Let's break it down. The top 10%, as in the top 120 million Indians, live like Germans, earning more than $15,000 per capita. They've got global jobs, they invest in US stocks, and they order avocado toast via Zomato. The middle 300 million Indians live like Bangladesh. They hustle, they escape poverty, but they're just one medical bill away from slipping back. And then we have the bottom billion. Here we have 1 billion people with a per capita income of just $1,000. And these people live like the people of sub-Saharan Africa. Yes, you heard that right. Over 1 billion Indians live like the poorest parts of the world. We are talking about no proper sanitation, no stable electricity, no digital access, and very limited opportunities.
கரண்ட் இல்லாத இந்த குழந்தைங்க படிக்கிறதுல ரொம்ப மோசமாக இருக்குது. ஹாஸ்டலில் சேர்த்துருக்காங்க, ஆனால் அங்கே போய்
What is it meant for rural areas where children don't have access to devices by which they can access online classes?
For the young and the old, this railway track is their equivalent of a bathroom.
These public facilities are filthy, smelling, and the only option for people here if they want to use a public toilet.
Smart grid or smart meter. जैसे एडवांस टेक्नोलॉजी का इस्तेमाल किया जा रहा है, स्ट्रीट लाइट का आधुनिकीकरण किया जा रहा है.
அப்புறம் நீட்டாமல் வெளியே வர முடியாது. இந்த கரெக்ட் பல்ஸ் இல்லாதனால எல்லாமே பாதிக்குது. இவ்வளோதான் நடக்குது மாறதுக்கு.
So while India's average per capita income is $2,400, the economic experience of the bottom 70% is nothing short of a nightmare. And this is where it gets scary. Just like Malaysia, India is banking on cheap labor and exports from this bottom billion. We are trying to grow by assembling phones, cars and gadgets. But here's the hard truth. Wages alone won't build a rich country, and factories alone won't lift 1 billion people out of poverty. And Malaysia tried that, but they got stuck. And today we have 3 big traps that we're just walking right into. First is the education trap in India. In India, we produce millions of graduates every year, but only about 45% of them actually possess the necessary skills for the job market. Now that's not a skill gap, that is a system failure. We built coaching centers, but we forgot to build campuses. We teach kids to crack exams, but not solve problems. And the result? Underpaid engineers, unemployed MBAs, and a generation full of degrees, but no direction. In fact, the underemployment situation is so bad that when the UP government released 62 posts for a peon's job, more than 93,000 people applied, including 3,700 PhDs, 50,000 graduates, and 28,000 postgraduates. This is the education trap that we are walking into. Third grade education and no scope of innovation. Then we have the next trap, which is the innovation deficit trap. Despite our massive size and potential, you know what? India spends only 0.7% of its GDP on R&D. And if you compare that to other countries, it will put you to shame. South Korea stands at 5.21%, Germany stands at 2.68%, China stands at 2.56%. Now mind you, we're talking about the Chinese economy, which is sitting at $17 trillion, which is practically 4 times bigger than India. So if you see, we are practically nowhere, guys. In fact, India files fewer than 100,000 patents a year. Well, South Korea files over 150,000 patents, the US files 280,000 patents, and China files 600,000 patents a year. They built Samsung, Hyundai and LG while we are still waiting for the next Indian global brand. And you know what's the worst part? We are not even good at assembly, guys. We are not building the next Samsung. We are not building the next Hyundai. We are not even winning the low-cost manufacturing game. Did you know that? This is a game that Malaysia played 40 years ago, by the way. And let me tell you why. We are still struggling with basic literacy. Our engineering colleges are not producing inventors. They produce copy-paste research papers just to pass semester exams. And thirdly, even if our people want to work, we don't have enough factories. Do you remember the grand vision of Make in India? It was supposed to make India the factory of the world. But 10 years later, what happened? Manufacturing's share of GDP has barely moved. It was 15% in 2014, and even after 10 years, it's still lingering around 15 to 17%. This is the reason why our productivity cannot skyrocket, our cheap labor is not being leveraged, and even if we succeed in cheap labor tomorrow, if there is another country in Asia or Africa that has cheaper labor, just like in Malaysia, companies will move out of India. This is how we are walking into a middle income trap. So the question is, what do we do? Well, the solution is pretty straightforward. It's called the 3I framework: investment, innovation and infusion. Let's look at South Korea again to understand better. In the 1960s, while South Korea's GDP per capita was $150, instead of depending on foreign aid, they built a roadmap to attract investment. They poured money into infrastructure, reformed land rights, made starting businesses ridiculously easy, and most importantly, they invested in primary education with laser focus. This attracted factories created jobs created income, and that income lifted millions of people out of poverty. We are partially succeeding here, but not fully. There is still a lot more work to do. Malaysia succeeded at this first stage as well. But here's where most countries stop. And here's where Korea knew something that others did not. Korea knew that investment alone cannot make Korea rich. And this is where the next stage starts, which is called infusion, as in climbing the value chain. In South Korea, instead of staying at the bottom of the supply chain, they decided to climb it. To do that, they imported technology. Samsung began licensing designs from Japanese giants like Sanyo and NEC. They reverse engineered products, built domestic capacity, and produced better versions. And while Samsung was doing this, the Korean government backed them. Look at this line chart. The government first played a crucial role where they introduced adoption subsidies, as in they rewarded companies to copy tech. And while Malaysia kept assembling imported parts, Korea started mimicking global brands, and then they built their own global brands. But even this had limits, because at some point you can't just copy, you must create. And this is where the third stage came in, which was the innovation stage. This is called the final leap. In the 1980s and 90s, Korea stopped subsidizing tech adoption and they started heavily funding R&D. They gave money to companies not to copy, but this time to invent. And the results were absolutely insane. In 1980, Korea spent just 0.5% of GDP on R&D. But by 1990, it tripled to 1.6%. And today, they've tripled it again, reaching 4.8% of GDP. And the result? Private sector R&D exploded, growing by 26 times in a single decade. But here's another important point. Just spending money on R&D doesn't guarantee intellectual property. Because innovation isn't just a result of cash infusion, it is a result of brilliant minds put together. So you need innovators. And you know what Korea did? They ramped up higher education spending, they trained engineers, scientists, managers by the thousands, and the results were revolutionary. Samsung went from selling noodles to inventing curved OLED screens. Hyundai went from assembling parts to building entire vehicles from scratch. LG stopped being a budget appliance maker and started building futuristic batteries and flexible displays. Now you might be thinking, bro, even India has Bajaj, Birla and Reliance, right? Sure, we do. A few giants are definitely innovating in India. But here's the difference. In India, innovation is the exception. In South Korea, it's the system. And I want to prove this using numbers. In 2023, while South Korea files over 156,972 patents globally, India files just over 82,811 patents. That's a 2x gap in spite of Korea having just 1/25th of India's population. So yeah, a country with 100 times less population than India is still spending more on R&D and it is filing more patents than India, a country with 1.4 billion people.